If becoming a professional artist is something that you've been circling and skirting around for a while, let me assure you that there's never been a better time to be an artist. Don't wait. Go. Make it happen. Grab it with both hands and jump in. Do not give up fighting. If you've got that dream, keep going until you break through.
The art world is always changing. It's a dynamic space where creativity and commerce collide. Finding your path and staying true to your craft isn't easy. Welcome to the Professional Artist Podcast. This show explores what it truly takes to build a meaningful and sustainable art career. Each week, we offer intimate, in-depth conversations that reveal which business strategies actually work, giving you the inspiration and insight to fuel your artistic journey. I'm your host today, Christina Demiani, and in this episode, we're diving into the world of Andrew Tischler, a painter working in classical realism and a passionate educator. With over 20 years' experience as a professional artist, he has sold paintings to international collectors, completed major commissions, and built a thriving online learning platform called Tisch Academy, a global art community where he shares tutorials on painting, business, and creative growth. In this conversation, we're exploring the proven strategies that have sustained Andrew's career for over 2 decades. Here's what you'll gain from our discussion. Structured creativity. Andrew reveals how to organize your day in focused blocks, minimize distractions, and stay in flow to produce your best work consistently. The pivot mindset. From losing his primary market during the global financial crisis to reinventing himself as an educator, Andrew shares how strategic pivoting and reframing adversity have been key to his long-term success. Teaching and giving back. Andrew offers specific guidance for art educators that will help them build a thriving revenue stream while empowering others creatively. All right, let's explore the world of Andrew Tischler. The painting we're going to hear about is titled Milford Sound, a striking New Zealand coastal landscape that holds both visual drama and personal meaning. Andrew shares with us what draws him to scenes like this, and how creating from an emotional experience is the foundation of great art.
It's a giant landscape painting. I'm really drawn to depth, light, and atmosphere. And so I'm creating scenes, hopefully, that show this vast dimension in them. Milford Sound is also one of New Zealand's iconic landscapes. And virtually everybody that comes to the South Island of New Zealand, which is probably the most scenic, they're going to visit Milford Sound. And so here we have dramatic mountains that rise abruptly, just come straight up out of this sea. And then in the foreground, we've got a whole array of driftwood and rocks and things. It's a very tidal area moving back and forth. I think first you have to be moved as an artist. You have to be drawn to the subject matter. So I live in one of the most beautiful places on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. So I live here in the South Island. I'm very close to this subject. I am drawn to this scene. So first, I think you have to be struck, whatever it is. And then painting for me is teasing out that experience. It's reliving it in the studio, but it's a way of documenting it and celebrating it and share with somebody else. And so I think when we're emotionally invested as artists, I think then we stand a better chance at making great art.
Working at such a grand scale takes more than just inspiration. It takes discipline, structure, and intentional planning. Andrew shares the process behind Milford Sound and how his workflow has evolved since completing the painting.
How I structured my day when I created this painting is very different to how I structure my day now. So this was completed in 2018. Essentially, you have to begin with the end in mind. You have to have some sort of plan. It's just like a house does not go up without a blueprint. I tend not to paint paintings at this scale without a solid design. And so that has to be the foundation for the project. So I'm doing countless compositional studies, whether they're sketches, digital designs, or an oil study. I'm working out my colors, I'm working out my composition, and then I basically get to work through a process. And I love painting. Yes, painting is my creative outlet. Yes, it's my passion, but I treat it like a job. And I take it very seriously. So I try to get in as many hours as I can. And I try to structure my day around that to be able to prioritize that painting time. I structure everything in my life to be able to maximize that creativity. And I think it's really important to whatever hours you're dedicating to whatever it is you're engaged in, that those are good hours of what we like to call flow state, right? Everybody wants to find that flow. But I think sustained amounts of time and consistent blocks of time. I like to have a lot of blocks through my day so I can really dial this thing in. So having some level of organization and structure, I think, is key. But in terms of the overall amount of time that this painting took, I think you're looking at about 6 months of work, more or less full time. Now that I've dialed in my process even more, I'd be doing a painting like this in about 2 months' time.
Could you give us an example of one part of your process that you have dialed down and reduced the time by 50, 60%? Can you just tell us something so we have a clearer idea of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if I look at just the design process, for instance, and how design leads into the final painting, when I first started, I would have sketches and I'd have drawings and oil studies. And I was very resistant to using anything digital. And it took me many years before I embraced it fully. And so in the initial stages, what I'd do is I'd have most of the story there. I'd actually have something I could present to a client, say, here's an idea of how your painting is going to look based on these sketches and these oil studies. And they were loose, but more or less you could see the composition of what was going to happen. But I since have gone digital on a lot of these bigger canvases. And when I say digital, I'm using this, which is a Wacom tablet, and I'm drawing directly into Photoshop. There's no AI and there's no photo bashing, as they call it. I try to do as much as I can by hand, and I draw and I practice drawing daily where there's not the use of photography or tracing. Yes, I'm following references, but I'm really bringing this thing to life layer by layer in Photoshop by drawing. So I'm literally drawing down here, looking at the screen, the image is unfolding in front of me. And so that process digitally on a big painting can take somewhere up to 3 weeks of work, which seems like a lot. But the thing is that jumping into the painting, then I've got a detailed blueprint. There is no guesswork whatsoever. And what it did for me is it cut out abortive work. What would happen when I was working from my sketches, oil studies, designs, all that sort of thing, I would be looking at that final painting, maybe I'd be into detail, and I'd be like, hey, that tree needs to move over to the right by about a foot on a big painting. And now I'm repainting this thing that took me days and days. And so that eats into the overall time. But when you have something like the digital medium, you're drawing on a Wacom tablet in Photoshop and you've got that tree on a layer, you just pick it and you move it. It really sped that process up so much. So even though it seems like a lot of time to invest up front in a digital drawing, it saves me in the long run.
Balancing the creative process with the demands of running a professional art business can be challenging for any artist. Listen as Andrew shares how he structures his days with intention and discipline, and how learning to delegate has been key to staying focused on what he does best.
I think you have to structure your time. I create blocks of time and I eliminate transition time going from task A to task B. Then I can be quite effective through my day. I wake up really early. I'm up at 3:45 each morning, and I live very close to my studio. I'm at my drawing board generally between about 4:30 and 6:30. One thing I've learned is that I need to have people that I can delegate effectively to. So people that are competent, that are able to pick up those tasks that are the things that I don't want to do. And so I've been able to boil this down now, fortunately. It's been such a blessing for me to go, okay, what is it that I do best? And what are the things that I love to do, I really want to do, the things that only I can do, that I can't really delegate this? And let me delegate everything else. And I have a daily sync up meeting where we go over things, emails that have come in and things that only I can answer about the technical process.
Entrepreneurial journeys always include resistance, doing things you might not want to do. Andrew discusses how he overcomes resistance and navigates those challenging moments, and the mindset that keeps him moving forward when the work gets difficult.
There's resistance in absolutely everything I do. There's a certain amount of pain that comes with achieving any amount of recognition, success, following, whatever. So resistance is just baked into this equation, regardless of where you are in this journey. And when I started, I had that idea that one day it's going to be easy. And now that I've gotten to a place where I am actually living the dream that I had when I was 21 years old, when I first stepped out and went pro, I had no idea that I would get here. But that resistance is just part of life, I feel. And so I've learned over the years to adopt this word. It's one of my favorite words, and it's until. I will keep working until I break through. I will keep applying pressure to this until it works. I will keep tinkering with this problem until I find the solution. And so I think that far too often we'll try 2 or 3 things and then we'll give up. But I had to be the guy that kept trying and trying and trying, regardless of how many times, until I found that thing that would work. Over the years, I've thrown a lot of ideas at the wall and I've just kept to what sticks. And I'm still throwing ideas at the wall to see what sticks. The amount of people that I've come across that have just given up on a dream because they hit a spot of resistance, it's amazing. And my heart goes out to them. And I don't want to shame them for giving up in that moment. But to whoever's listening to this now and maybe finds himself at that point, do not give up fighting. If you've got that dream, keep going until you break through. Now, that said, there is another component to this. You don't want to keep doing the same things over and over and over again. You want to be creative, resourceful, and you need to find some sort of feedback from what's going on out there. There's never been a better time to be an artist. With the amount of resources that we have and the amount of strategies that are out there, it's a great time to dive in. But learn those strategies, learn what works for you, what fits you, your personality, your brand, so to speak, your particular direction, and adopt that and get to work, figure it out.
The idea of failure in any area of your life or business can be terrifying, but it's how you respond to failure that defines your success. Andrew experienced a major setback that forced him to rethink his approach, leading him to pivot and discover a new and unexpected direction that renewed his creative drive.
I've had some doozies, but it's always caused me to look back at that and go, was that really a failure? I think your ability to look at adversity or look at resistance or maybe something that didn't quite go your way, look at that in such a way and pivot. And that pivot is going to do so much. How quickly you pivot too. I've had some disasters. I'll give you one. So I had something that was outside of my control, but it resulted in failure, in total abject failure. I came up in my 20s. I was in Perth, Western Australia. I tapped into the mining resource sector. These were my clients that were buying my paintings. And I'm known for a lot of these big open desert landscapes, gorges, canyons, waterfalls, based on Karajini National Park in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. And so I was living high on the hog. I was doing great. I was having sellout shows, working on commissions, making tens of thousands of dollars off exhibitions and commissions and stuff. And I didn't know what to do with the success at the time. I was an idiot. And I didn't think it would end either. I didn't have any concept that this would end. And then what happened is we had the global financial crisis. And when that hit, it was like, ooh, okay, I felt an initial little sting. A few names dropped off that waiting list. We were insulated, though, in Western Australia with that strong resource sector. So we didn't really feel it in WA until that there was a downturn in how much iron ore China was buying at the time. And that overnight, it seemed to shut down iron ore exports. And so what happened is the executives that were buying my paintings now suddenly, they weren't there. I went from a waiting list of over 12 months to nothing, crickets, absolute crickets. What do I do in this moment? There was a transition between absolutely going broke as a professional artist, feeling washed up like a has-been, being able to paint, but not being able to lower my market value because of what had already been established, I couldn't just go, oh, look, just give me $100 for the painting. I need to buy groceries. And it's nobody's fault but mine that I was financially irresponsible. I could have saved. I could have been sitting on a nest egg. I could have invested the money. I could have done something to insulate me from this issue. I learned that lesson since. But what I did at the time, I was like, okay, I'm backed into a corner here. Now what am I going to do? And so my pivot was, I'm going to teach. I've got to go into teaching. Turned out I loved it. I was resistant to that idea, but I had to do it. And then when I'm sitting there with my students one-on-one, I'm just like, wow, I love this. I love the light bulb moment that goes off for a student when they get this concept of, you mean I can warm up my sky and it's not going to turn green? Yeah, complementary opposites, buddy. Let's go. To me, that was so refreshing that I could be that go-between that allowed them to fully realize their creative potential. And it gave me so much purpose and meaning and direction. In a nutshell, the moral of that story is, and what I've learned since is, look, just like we know failure is going to happen, resistance is going to happen, we're going to have our knocks along the way, something's always going to come up. Finding a way to pivot and asking that question immediately, okay, how is this working in my favor? How could I use this? If I had thought about that immediately rather than sitting there for weeks, if not months, licking my wounds, if I could have just gone immediately going, how can I use this? Okay, pivot. Here's the direction we're going in. Change course now.
Andrew offers a range of products in his business. Listen as he describes his unique mindset around the revenue potential for every painting he creates and how this business landscape ultimately supports total creative freedom.
There's a YouTube channel, of course, and that's such a vital component of this whole thing. I basically draw a map of who we are and what we represent. And it's two different worlds, two different spheres that intersect. I've got the physical world and the digital world. So I think regardless of whatever offering I'm putting out there, I had to recognize, okay, I'm making a physical product. That physical product is going to be the genesis of a whole range of other things. Rather than just make a painting and sell that painting, I asked myself this cheeky question: how many times could I get paid? And so the first no-brainer is, I can make prints. Let's do that. And I might be able to license some products. Okay, maybe we'll do that too. But I could definitely make prints. Now that's everything in the physical. What about the digital? I've got all this video footage. I could cut it into a full tutorial. That's one thing, is those full tutorials that are available on the website. The next thing is our academy. You can purchase something from me. It's going to be, I hope, the best quality oil painting tutorial that you've ever watched, and is going to give you more information than you could possibly consume in one sitting. But if you want to get a little bit more inspiration, more on a weekly basis, that's what the Academy's for. So you can have this one-off tutorial, or you can pay. And what I really wanted to create was like the Netflix of art. So I thought, could we set up a subscription model that would really serve people? But not only that, build a community where people could interact, message each other, share their work, share their paintings, their drawings, give each other feedback, all that sort of stuff. And then at the same time, I'm feeding into that community by showing up for a live stream every single week, which I love. I'm putting in there into that content library. I'm uploading hours of content every week. And right now we're sitting on over 350 hours of content. And then you've got all of your social media. Admittedly, I have been sporadic with the social media. YouTube I've been most consistent on, but I've also had to dial in and figure out what is working. Where do I actually reach the most people and what's most effective for me? It hasn't turned out to be Facebook or Instagram, though those followings are reasonably large, but with about close to 140,000 on Instagram, just edging up to that, a little over 250,000 on Facebook. It's something, but I think what we're going to do is start posting as close to daily as we can now. And we're working on a new strategy with those platforms to get those engaged. And I think ultimately what we want to do is redirect people back to the content where I think they're really going to get the message, which is probably YouTube. And then from there, there's a call to action. Generally, it's to go to the Academy and join our Academy course. For instance, I just did a big gallery studio reveal. And so on that, I talk about art business right at the end. And I say, if you want to learn more about art business, check out the course. But suffice to say, what this has allowed me to do is to build a business and stability around myself where it's actually turned out I don't have to sell a single painting in order to make this work. I can paint what I want, how I want to paint it. Yes, I do take on commissions. I've got about a year's worth of commissions that I'm chipping away at right now, but I'm also working towards a major solo show.
For artists who feel called to teaching, Andrew highlights the importance of mastering your craft and creating a clear, systematized approach.
I think first is it might be very tempting to jump in and start teaching right away and go, wow, easy money. Make sure that you can actually produce the work first. You've got to show up with something that's quality. Maybe having something that shows that you have some of being able to do this. I think you've got to be in a position where you know the subject that you're speaking about. Teaching this course on art business has really forced me to become accountable. And I had to recognize I don't know everything there is to know about Instagram. I don't know everything there is to know about social media. I'm not great with the finances or the numbers or the analytics. What do I know about? What can I talk about? And so I start there. And then I also lean into those weaknesses and try and turn those weaknesses into strengths before I'm going to go out there and start teaching that. That said, maybe you don't approach this thing as a teacher, but maybe you approach this as a sharer. We often think about social media being a place that we go to sell. It's a place where you go and share you. Just go and put your stuff out there, put your life out there, put your work out there, and genuinely give. It's not a place you go to get. It's a place you go to give. And when you go there and give, you're going to start building that authentic trust, that rapport with people based on your true offering that's true to yourself. And you can build something amazing without ever teaching anybody. I think my best advice to anybody going into teaching is, regardless of what methodology it is that you have a methodology, try and systematize what it is that you're talking about. I had to do this very early on. When I first started teaching live workshops, I was like, okay, I'm going to teach workshops. I know about painting. Okay. And then I was like, how would I structure this? And I was like, easy. Week one's going to be composition. Wait, what's composition? What am I going to do here? Week two is going to be color theory. Hang on a second. What color theory? So I started looking into things, rule of thirds, golden ratio, shape design, line and shape, tonal dynamic values, color arrangement, and then edge quality. And I started coming up with this system based on fundamentals of art. Yes, they have been around for a long time. The only thing that I think that I have is unique to me is that I've just structured it in a way that I haven't heard anybody else talk about before. So I think regardless of what it is, if this is something you want to get into and build a following on YouTube, on social media, and you want to do it as a teacher, find a methodology. And once you find that methodology, you can adapt, you can tweak, you can change.
After spending 2 decades building his art business, Andrew shares some of the major lessons he has learned about the nature of being a professional artist, key mindsets for success, and the most important decisions he has made along the way.
I'd say one of the biggest things is, I'll give you a couple. Number one, nobody's going to rescue you. Nobody's going to show up and do this thing for you. There are absolutely no shortcuts. So there are happy accidents, as Bob Ross would say. There are opportunities, there are synchronicities, but there are no shortcuts. I think knowing that, I gave up my habit of waiting for things to happen. I used to say this thing, this is going to be my year. This is going to be my year. This is going to be the year that I have my break. I was like, no, I stopped saying that now. How do I know it's going to be my year? No one's going to hand this to you. You have to work for it. Sometimes you have to fight for it. And the minute something starts going right, or the minute you announce your dream, the minute you start feeling a little bit of that success, get ready for the test. It's coming. And I don't mean that to sound negative. That test is a good thing. It's testing your resolve, your resilience, your resourcefulness. So tap into those resources, tap into that creativity, pivot quickly. Then I think the other vital lesson that I learned is I had to treat this like a business. I had to structure my time. I had to delegate effectively. I had to recognize what my weaknesses were, take them seriously. Don't ignore them. If I'm going to delegate to somebody, delegate it to somebody that I trust. When it comes to managing the business and the team, I recognize that I'm lacking there. What is management? It's seeing what's coming in, what's going out, what tasks need to happen. Here's our schedule. What's our release schedule looking like? When do we have to collaborate with this person? And having somebody to manage all those moving parts allowed me to step out and become an entrepreneur, but also the technician that I needed to be. Most businesses are started by a technician who has an entrepreneurial seizure and proceeds then to mismanage the business. So I had to recognize my weakness here. I go, I am not a manager. So that's been a huge lesson for me. It was a massive turning point. The minute I formalized roles within my company, the minute I formalized everything into standard operating procedures, my business exploded. If this is something that you want to do, if becoming a professional artist is something that you've been circling and skirting around for a while, let me assure you that there's never been a better time to be an artist. Don't wait. Go. Make it happen. Grab it with both hands and jump in. And this idea that, it's crowded in there. Oh, how am I going to find my feet? Look, you were fearfully and wonderfully made. You are unique. You have your own voice. So jump right in, because there's somebody that's waiting to hear from you, the way you do things. Don't try and be different. Don't necessarily try and even be original. Be authentic.
Andrew Tischler's story is a masterclass in finding success on your terms as a professional artist. His commitment to teaching underscores the value of giving back and inspiring others to find their own creative voices while building a thriving, meaningful business. The lessons he shares form a blueprint for transforming your artistic passion into a sustainable, fulfilling career that empowers others and creates lasting impact in the world. This podcast grows because people like you share it. So if you got value today, if it inspired you to think differently or take action, hit follow or subscribe and send it to one person who needs to hear it. That's how we keep making more episodes. Thank you for listening to the Professional Artist Podcast, and until next time.